So good evening once again, and welcome to our third session on web development. Super excited for this particular week, especially since we will be dealing with one of the most asked about and anticipated topics in this particular module, and that is how do we apply styling to our web pages, Yeah, so that is what we are going to be looking at tonight. And I hope you are ready to dive into the session, Yeah. So just give me a few minutes, just a minute or two. Then we begin. Really hope I'm audible. Really hope I'm audible because I can see something about my sound. I really hope I'm audible now. Okay, good. So this particular week we are diving into CSS, and we'll get to see what CSS is, what it stands for, and how we can use it in our different web projects and applications. So CSS, in a nutshell, simply stands for cascading style sheets. Cascading style sheets. That is what basically CSS stands for, cascading style sheets. And this is simply a style sheet language that is used to control the presentation and the layout of your HTML documents. This is how they appear, how you make them appear, from the color to the size to position to layout and so on and so forth. All that is done through this style sheet language that is known as cascading style sheets. So this will help you or allow you to apply the styles that I've mentioned previously, that is color, even fonts, font families, font sizes, spacing, positioning, and so on and so forth to the various HTML elements that you've already defined in your web pages. So for today, we are going to cover the basics of CSS, and that will include the syntax and structure of CSS rules. We'll get to see the different types of selectors that you can use in CSS and also interact with various and different properties and values that you can modify so that you define different styles on your HTML elements. So we'll begin by just looking at the syntax of CSS rules. We'll begin by looking at the syntax of CSS rules. What is the syntax? How are you supposed to define these rules in the style sheet language? So CSS follows a very basic and simple syntax. First, you begin with a selector. You begin with a selector followed by what we refer to as a declaration block. Declaration block. And within the declaration block, you have what we refer to as property value pairs. Property value pairs. Property value pairs, we'll get to see what they are shortly. Within the declaration block, you have what we refer to as property value pairs. Property value pairs. So, for example, a simple CSS rule will look something like so. So you have that as the selector, and then you have your declaration block. A declaration block is surrounded by curly braces. This is what I am referring to as a curly brace. I'm sure you've seen this symbol on your keyboard. It's next to the letter P. That symbol, we refer to that as a curly brace. So a declaration block is surrounded by the curly brace. And within the curly brace is where you define your property and your value, property value pair. And they are separated by a full colon. A single property value pair is separated by a full colon. But if in the event that you want to define more than one property value pair, then you separate them with a semicolon so that you can have as many property value pairs as you wish to define. Okay, so what are these properties that we are actually speaking about? So when it comes to CSS, property is actually what you want to style. What you want to style. That one we refer to that as the property. For example, you want to style the color. That is a property. You want to style the font size. That is another property. You want to style a border. That is another property. Okay? What you exactly want to style is what we are referring to as a property. Style sheets, style. Sorry. Now, for the value, this is how you want to style. How you want to style. That is for the value. So, for example, if the property is color, how do you want to style it? Then you would choose a specific color, such as red or blue or green or yellow, and so on and so forth. So property or value in this case defines how you actually want to style something, how you actually want to style. If it is for size, for example, the font size property, how do you want to style this? Maybe I want a large piece of text. Then I can define that using 20 pixels or higher, depending on what I want to choose. So this is the basic syntax of a CSS rule. The whole of this is what we are referring to as a CSS rule. So let me just give an example of, let's say we are styling a paragraph. We all know a paragraph element. It's denoted by the P. So we say, we want the color of this paragraph to be blue. Or I want to change the font size of this paragraph. And I want it very, very small. So let me say I want 10 pixels as the size of this paragraph. Okay, so this is how CSS rule would look like. This is how a CSS rule would look like. You have your selector as the very first bit of the rule. Then you have your declaration block surrounded by curly braces. And then within the declaration block, you have your list of properties and their corresponding values. Each property has its own corresponding values. So you need to be very careful on the values that you define for the different properties, because they are not interchangeable. They are not interchangeable. Certain properties have their own certain corresponding values. Okay, so Having seen the structure of a CSS rule, we can now proceed to see how do you actually select an element that you want to style. How do you select an element that you want to style on your web page? How do you select it? So there are various ways in which you can achieve that. And we're going to go through some of the basic ways you can do that. Number one is by use of a universal selector. First, let me just begin by defining a selector. A selector just gives you a means and a way, a way of targeting HTML elements to style. That is the purpose of selectors. Remember, we said a CSS rule comprises of a selector and a declaration block. So this selector, it just gives you a way of targeting elements that you want to style. And how do we target those elements? The first way is by use of a universal selector. A universal selector. And just as the name suggests, this applies to every element on your web page. Universal. The word universal suggests all. So this particular selector applies to everything on your web page. I don't know if you've started writing database queries, but you all know the purpose of this symbol, the asterisk symbol. You all know the purpose of the asterisk symbol? Yeah, so that one in your database queries, if you use that one, it usually refers to all. So the same thing applies here in CSS. When you use this symbol, you are referring to each and every element within your web page or your HTML document, such that you can apply one particular styling to everything on your web page, depending on what you want to achieve. And the syntax is very, very simple. Begin with that, followed by your curly braces, and your property value pairs will follow within your declaration block. So that is method number one. Number two, you might come across what we refer to as an element selector, like what we have showcased at the beginning. So this one will target specific element types, okay? Elements of a specific type. For example, if I want to modify the style of all forms, then I will simply use the element name. I simply use the element name followed by my curly braces, and within my curly braces, I have my property value pairs. So what will happen is every form that appears on my web page will reference each and every style that I have defined. Every form. Same thing applies to if I want to style my unordered lists, all of them. If I want to style them in the same way, I will simply reference the unordered list element name. Same applies to tables. I will simply call up the table element name and so on and so forth. So when you are using the element selector, remember the styling that you define will be translated to all those elements of that specific type. Method number three. Don't worry, we are going to do this practically, at least using some of these selectors so that you can see how it actually works. Method number three is the ID selector, the ID selector. ID selector. Remember last week we defined an ID attribute as an attribute that uniquely identifies an element on your web page. So in the case of CSS, you might want to style one specific element. And to achieve that, then you can use the ID selector. You can use the ID selector where you have given an element. You have given an element, let's say an image. You have given an element, an ID attribute. Let me say this is a cover image. I've given it an attribute. I have a source and so forth. And I want to style this specific image. If I want to style this specific image, then I can use the ID attribute to style it and modify its presentation. So in CSS, to reference an ID selector, we use the hash symbol. We use the hash symbol for that purpose. We use the hash symbol followed by the ID name, followed by the ID name, and then you have your curly braces, and then you define your property value pairs. So you start with the hash symbol, followed by the ID name, and then your declaration block. So the styling that you define here will only be applied to the element that has the ID attribute as cover image. So remember, this one is for only one specific. This one is for one specific element. The element selector is for elements of a specific type. Universal selector is for all elements. Okay? There is a difference between those different types of selectors, okay? Number 4, another selector that you might come across with is the class selector, with the class selector. So with this particular type of selector, you introduce another attribute to an element or to more than one element. And that is the class attribute. To introduce the class attribute. So for example, let us say I have different divs. For example, let us say I have different divs or I have different sections. By the way, what is a div and what is a section? Is there a difference between the two? Let me see who reads ahead and who researches. What is a div on the chat box? How would you define a div? Yes, it is a block element. What is its purpose? Very good, Nicholas. Div acts as a container. Very, very nice. Yes, it is used to group and structure other HTML elements. Very, very nice. Very, very nice. Yeah, so they basically just do the same purpose. They are just containers, but a section is much more specific. This one is used to group related items. It is used to group related items, but they basically just perform the same purpose. Very nice, very nice. Very good to see those various answers, but you are You are correct in your explanations. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So for example, if I have a div and a section, so these are two very unrelated HTML elements, and I want to style them the same way. How can I achieve that? Then I will introduce a class attribute. I can introduce a class attribute. Let me say, I can call this main layout. Main layout. I will introduce that class attribute to both these elements, both of these elements. Okay, I can introduce a class attribute to both of these elements, and thereafter be able to style them in the same way. And how do we reference a class selector in CSS? We do that by using the dot notation. We do that by using the dot notation. So you begin with the dot notation followed by the class name, and then your declaration block. Okay, so you do the dot notation followed by the class name that you've given to the class attribute, and then followed by your declaration block. So the styles that I will define here will be applied to any element that I have used the class attribute main layout on. Okay, so with classes, you can style different types of elements, and mostly they are usually unrelated. So you can apply styling to unrelated elements. You can apply styling to unrelated elements. You only need to add the class attribute, give it a specific name, and with that class, you can apply it across several or multiple elements that are even unrelated. Okay? Another one that you might come across is the grouping selector or the group selector. So this one acts pretty much like pretty much like a class selector. It acts pretty much like a class selector. The only difference is with these ones, you actually define and specify the different elements that you want to style. So for example, I can have a web page with several different elements. Of course, they might be unrelated, but then I want to style them all the same. Let's say I have anchor tags, I have paragraphs, I have H1 headings, H2 headings, and H3 headings. And I want to style all of these the same way. Then I can use the grouping selector to do so. Where I just define and specify the different elements and separate them using commas. So the style that I will define here will be applied to all anchor tags, all paragraphs, all H1 headings, all level 2 headings, and all level 3 headings. So this is another way you might come across when you are interacting with CSS. It is known as the grouping selector or the group selector. Good. So we can just dive into defining this ourselves and see how it actually turns out. So please open your Visual Studio Code editors. Please open your Visual Studio Code editors. So we are currently in week 3. I always mention it's a good idea to organize your work. It is a very good idea to organize your work. So I want you to create two files. And this will be a challenge. This will be a challenge for everyone. I want you to create 2 files. Let me just put the instructions on the chat. I want you to create 2 files. The first one will be an index.html file. So each of these files, you'll have the basic structure of a web page. On the index file, I want you to include a H2 heading, paragraph, image, and an anchor tag that links to google.com. That is for the index file. I need you to create another file called data.html. In this file, I want you to add a table. So the table will have 4 columns. 4 columns for name, email, phone, and city. 4 columns for name, email, phone, and city, and then populate the table with at least 2 rows. At least 2 rows. And then for this one, add a footer with copyright information. By copyright information, you can just put the copyright symbol and the year, just that. Copyright symbol and the year. Okay. Yeah, so on the chat box, I want to see who will hack that one. Let us start with the index page. Just simply post what you have on the chat box. Not doing anything. Why do you want to see my work? I've given you a challenge. I'm not doing anything. I want you to do the work today. So create those 2 files and please follow instructions. Very important. People fail because they do not follow instructions. Follow instructions. I've asked for a basic structure for the index page, basic structure on the chat box, or I haven't posted on the chat box. I have asked for the index file to have a basic structure, H2 heading, a paragraph, an image, and an anchor tag to google.com. For the second file, that should be data.html. I want you to have a table with 4 columns, that is name, email, phone, and city, with at least 2 rows and footer with copyright information. Yeah, so let me see. This is who? This is God's Will, Omundi. Let me see. Title, H2, paragraph, image. Very, very good. Congratulations, Godwill. This is amazing. Victor Daniel. Very nice. Victor Daniel, very nice. Thank you. And also the second page. Thank you. Very, very good, Victor Daniel. Nice, nice, nice. So you can copy what Victor Daniel has done on the chat box. That is the first correct answer for the data page. And God's Will, that is the first correct answer for the index page. Very nice. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Good job. Good job. So I'm just going to copy what you have. If there is any mistake, it will be upon you, God's Will and Victor. So we have your index.html page. Oh, sorry. I'll copy this. That is our index.html page. The syntax looks very nice. Good, good, good. This looks amazing. Yeah. Oh, you're missing something, God's will. God's will, you're missing something, but very, very good work. For Victor, the second page. For Victor, the second page. Let me check this out. This is good. I think yours is much more complete. For the second page also. So for the second page, data.html. And this is from Victor. Let us see. Good, but I'll get rid of the border. Don't want that one for now. Well, you are missing the doc type. Very important. You see, that one is very, very important. But otherwise, very good job. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Yeah, so for the index, you need at least a H2 heading, a paragraph, an image, and an anchor tag, and an anchor tag that navigates to google.com. This is good job, Goodswill. And for the data.html, you need a table, 4 columns, name, email, phone, city, and then 2 rows, at least 2 rows, and then footer information with the copyright symbol and the year. Yeah, people have all Jodo contacts because I know where you've copied from. Yeah, it is okay. It is okay. It is okay. The use of AI, we cannot underscore the use of AI because it's becoming increasingly part of our day-to-day lives, but do not end up depending on it so much, so that you cannot think for yourself. Yeah, yeah, so you have HTML there. Yeah, I think this one is fine. This one is fine. And body, yeah, body, yeah, this is good. This is good. Okay, so I hope everyone has these 2 files. If not, just give me a minute. Let me upload this to a repository and share the repository link. Just a minute. And before I forget, next week you'll be having a very, very fast hackathon. So I hope you are ready for that one. Um, and remember, hackathons are compulsory to everyone. Eh? Yes, they are compulsory to everyone. So you need to submit some work for the hackathon. We'll be running for at least 4 days, if I'm not wrong. It's set for to begin on the 31st. So more information will be shared in the next couple of days. Please be on the lookout for any communication regarding the hackathon. You'll be building a portfolio website, your very own portfolio website. And please, 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 please follow instructions. If you do something that is not within the instruction scope, please do not blame us. Do not blame us if you end up being graded otherwise because you did not follow instructions. So please follow those instructions that will be laid out. Do not think you are very wise and do what is not required. So that one is coming up next week. So let me just set up this repository very quick, and then we can resume with our session. So this is session 3. This is week 3. Week 3, session 3. Yeah. So I'm doing a repository for the code base that we'll be working with. Just a minute. Be done very, very shortly. Yeah? Okay, so here we are. Here we are. There we go. There we go. Okay, let us be respectful, please. Yeah, there's no need for uncalled language. Let us be respectful, kindly. If you have any frustrations, you can get in touch. There's no need to use uncalled for language on the chat. Kindly, yeah? Okay. So I've shared the repository on the chat. Those are the files we will be working with. So our first file, we simply have a basic structure of our HTML. We have a heading, a paragraph, an image, and an anchor tag. So on the image, please make sure you have an image readily available to you, one that we are going to use, because I would want us to see how you can style an image also. So please make sure you have an image on your local machine, or an external image will still work. I had given a website last week where you can get free images without worry of copyright infringement. That was pexels.com. So let me also fetch an image here very, very quickly. Fetch an image here quickly. I'll not download it. I'll just use the external source. So let us run that. Let us run that. So should be what you should have. This is what you should have for your basic HTML web page. Before we apply any form of styling, this is what you should have for the index page. For the data page, this is what you should have. No styling applied whatsoever. So I posted the link to the repository that has both of these files. For the image, please make sure you have an image. You can visit pexels.com to get an image or any other image that you might want to use. Okay. So far we have seen the structure of a CSS rule. We have seen the different selectors, but how do you actually include CSS on your web pages? So there are three methods in which you can do that, and we are going to go through each one of them. We are going to go through each one of them. So method number one, we'll begin with method number one. Method number one. We'll begin with method number one. So allow me to do a comment here. Let's increase that size. Method number one. So I hope we are all on the same page. You have your files. You have the files. We are moving on. Method number one is what we refer to as inline styling. Inline styling. Inline styling or inline CSS. And just as the name suggests, this type of method of including CSS is in line with the elements. So what happens in this type of styling is you introduce a style attribute. You introduce a style attribute to the opening tag of any element. You simply introduce a style attribute to the opening tag of any element, okay? So for example, let us style our body. So for our body, I want to simply change the background color. You can simply change the background color. So the property here is background color. Property here is background color. I may not check dramatic color. This is bisque. Don't know what color that is, but that one is fine. I'm going to save my page and immediately go back to my browser. And if you followed my instructions, then you should be able to see your background color has changed. So let me just repeat what I've done. So we are looking at method number one of including your styling information on your web page. Method number one is inline styling or inline CSS. So with this particular method of styling, you introduce a style attribute onto an element. You introduce a style attribute onto an element. We defined attributes as a way of additional information, providing additional information to your elements. So you introduce a style attribute. And because we have already identified and targeted a particular element that we want to style, we are going to disregard the selector. We're going to disregard the selector because we are going specifically for an element. We have already targeted an element. So we are going to disregard the selector. Two, we are also going to disregard the declaration block. We're also going to disregard the declaration block for the same reason, because we have already identified an element. And then we head straight to the property value pairs. We head straight to the property value pairs, and we can define as many as we want as long as they are separated by a semicolon. So for our example here, we are simply changing the background color of our body to this particular color. This is bisque. If it is pronounced that way, I'm not sure if it is not. So this is bisque. We have defined that as our background color. So if you save your page and go back to your browser, you should see that the color of your background has changed. So just by a show of hand of thumbs up on the chat box, please confirm you have been able to change the background color of your landing page. Very, very good. Fidel, Gift, Grace, Matthew, Stanley. Very, very nice. Congratulations to all of you. Anyone who is stuck anywhere, please let me know. I can. Do I have a white box? I'm not sure I have a white box. Let me share my screen also. Let me just share my entire screen so that you also see what I have. You might be thinking, I'm telling you to do things and I don't have them. Yeah, so I hope you can see my screen also. So that is what I have. That is what I have. My background color has changed. My background color has changed. And please let us focus on the class because I am seeing some questions here that are not even related to what we are doing. Yes, purity. Where have you gone wrong? Where have you gone wrong? You can't see my screen. My screen is not visible. Are you sure, Sami? My screen is very, very visible. Yeah, my screen is visible. Yeah, I think, yes, my screen is visible. So if your image is not showing, please make sure your source is a valid location of the image. Remember what we did last time? It needs to be a valid location of the image. You need to correctly reference the correct location of that image. Otherwise, it won't show. It won't show at all. Okay? That is the only reason why your image will not show, because the source attribute is wrong. The source attribute is wrong. That is the only reason why your image will not show. So yeah, let me upload this to the repository. I think I already shared the link. Let me just update the repository very quickly with those new changes so that some of us are not left behind. So that was the index page. That was the index page. Yeah, so that was the index page. So that was method number one. This is the quickest and most easiest way in which you can define your styling, or you can include styling information on your web page via inline styling. So with inline styling, we said you introduce the style attribute to any element. I can do the same for the H2 heading. I can do the same for paragraph, for image, for the anchor tag. I can do the same. I can simply introduce a style attribute and thereafter define my various property value pairs, okay, to change and define the presentation of those elements. So that was inline styling. You know your source is valid if the image is showing. That is the only way you'd know. If your image is not showing, then your source is not a valid source. Can we be patient? We're going step by step. We are going step by step. Some of you are really impatient. You really want to rush life. You take things slow. Okay, so that was inline styling. Inline styling. That was method number one. Method number two. Method number two is what we refer to as internal styling or internal CSS. Internal styling or internal CSS. And with this particular mode or method of styling, you simply introduce a style tag. Remember the first one, we introduced a style attribute. For this one, we introduce a style tag. And best coding practices dictate that the style tag should be located within the head section. So we are going to introduce a style tag here. Within the head section, introduce a style tag. And after introducing the style tag, you're simply going to start defining your CSS rules here. So I want us to style the paragraph, the heading, the image, and the anchor tag using internal styling. So for the paragraph, let us start with the heading, the H2 heading. With the H2 heading. So we will do an element selector for the H2 heading. We'll do an element selector. So for this H2 heading, I want us to do what? We will simply apply an underline on the heading. So for that one, we'll use the text decoration property and specify the value as underline. And I want this to be at the center of the page. So we'll use the text align property. We'll use the text align property. That is for the H2 heading. Remember, if we had any other H2 heading, the same styling would be applied to it, since we are using an element selector. And element selector do what? They style all elements of a specific type. Okay? Good. So that is our H2 heading. So you can save our file, go back to our browser, You should see your H2 heading. It is now centered on the page and it is underlined. It is centered on the page and it is underlined. Centered on the page and it is underlined. So centering on the page, that is the text align property, and the value is center. And aligning, that is the text decoration property, and the value is underline. The value is underline. Okay, so that is our H2 heading. For our paragraph, what do we introduce? What do we introduce? We introduce an ID attribute. We can introduce an ID attribute for our paragraph. We can introduce an ID attribute to our paragraph. So ID, let me say this is P main. P main. And to reference an ID selector in CSS, we use the hash symbol followed by the ID name, followed by the ID name. So for our paragraph, I simply, let us just change the color. Let us change the color of our paragraph. Not white, not white. Let us change the color of our paragraph and increase the font size. Increase the font size of our paragraph. So what have we done for our paragraph? We have introduced an ID attribute that is a unique identifier for this particular paragraph. And to reference that in CSS, we use the hash symbol followed by the ID attribute name that we had already defined. So for our paragraph, we are simply changing the color to white and the font size to 20 pixels. Let us do another change. Let me do font style. Let me do font style. We can do italic. Let us see those drastic changes on our page. Let us see those drastic changes on our page so that we actually know something is changing. We actually know something is changing. Yeah, so that is my, I hope it's visible. White is not a very good color. It is not a very good color. Let me do red. Let me do red, yeah. At least red is much more visible. Yeah. So as you can see, if you've interacted with any word processing software, I think you know what italics represents. If you italicize a piece of text, you know how it will look like. So that is our piece of text, italicized. Font size has been increased to 20 pixels, and the color has been changed to red. And the color has been changed to red. Just before we move on, by a show of thumbs up, who has been able to change the heading and the paragraph? Thumbs up. Using internal styling, Very good. John, Fidel, Stella, Abigail, Josephat, Praise. Very, very good. Very, very good. Amazing, amazing. That is very, very nice. That is very, very nice. Good, good. Celebrate, Jose. Celebrate, just celebrate. Celebrate. Yeah, that is good. That is good. Very good, very good, very good. Yeah, anyone with any issue, please let me know on the chat box. Anyone with any issue, let me know on the chat box. Just let me know. Yes, Ali Abdullah, what is your issue? What is your issue? How to add color? Where specifically to the to the paragraph. Not linking. I'm not sure what is not linking, Ali. I'm not sure what you mean. Not linking. I can't understand that. Uh, that means people, you don't want to follow instructions. Uh, please just follow instructions. Please, kindly, just follow instructions. Uh, yeah, just follow instructions. I've asked you to introduce an ID attribute to the paragraph. That one was step number one before you can actually perform the styling on that paragraph. So please just follow instructions. Let me just update this repo. Let me update this repo. Let me update the repo. Then I can reshare the link. So that is the link once again. The repo is updated. I think was asking about the name. I think it was Felista. Felista, if you can access the repo, that one has an image that is showing from pexel.com. Yeah, so you should have been able to center your text to the middle of the page, underline the H2 heading, change the color of your paragraph to whichever color that you picked. I personally picked red, italicized the piece of text and also increased the font size. Also increased the font size. Yours is not working with the code. Which code? The one I have posted. This should just work out of the box. I have shared what I have. Once again, I mentioned if your image is not displaying on your web page, please confirm the source is correct. The SRC attribute needs to be very, very correct. If you are referencing an image on your local machine, please make sure that source is correct. The same applies if you are referencing an external image. The source needs to be correct. That is the only reason your image will not display. So the source needs to be very correct. The extension on the image needs also to be very correct. You might have referenced the correct source, but you have failed to reference the correct extension on the image name. So maybe you are trying to display a JPEG and for your extension, you've put PNG. So please check on those. That is the only way your image will not display. There is no other error that would come about that will bring about the image not showing. because you're already online. If you're referencing an external source, the image will just display. If you're referencing an image on your local machine and it is not displaying, trust you me, the source attribute is not correct. So that was method number 2, internal CSS. Method number 2, internal CSS. Still moving on with internal CSS, I want us to style our image and the anchor tag. I want us to style our image and the anchor tag. So for image, I will still use the element selector. I will use the element selector. For image, what can we do for the image? We can apply a border. We can apply a border to the image. We can apply a border to the image. So we'll use the border property. And for the border property, this one takes several values. The first value being the size of your border. So I can do 3 pixels. Second value being the pattern of your border. So I want to do a solid pattern. And the third value being the color of your border. Color of your border. So I'm changing the border property of my image. The size of my border will be 3 pixels. The style of my border will be solid. And the color of my border will be black. So I'll save that and go back to my browser. I need a very distinct border. Let me do white. Let me do white so it is very visible and 5 pixels. Yeah, I think that one is fine. White, 5 pixels. And then we can do rounded corners. We can do rounded corners. I can do 5 pixels for our image. I think those border corners are rounded. Yes, they are. Yes, they are. So for our image, I have used an element selector. And I have simply added a border. The border property will take up several values. The first one being the size of the border. Second one being the pattern or the style of the border. For this one, I've selected solid. I just want a solid line. And finally, the color of the border. And for that one, I've selected white so that it is distinct and visible. And then for rounded corners on the border, we use the property called border radius. We use the property called border radius, and I have set that to 5 pixels. So with that, this is the change that you should see on your. This is the change that you should see on your image. That is the change that you should see on your image. So images belong to a certain group of elements that we refer to as inline elements. That is why you see the image and the anchor tag in one line. So we can change that by simply adding a display property and change that to a block level element. Block level elements occupy an entire line item. So they occupy an entire line item from the left to the very end at the right side. So as you can see, our anchor tag has now moved to the next line. Before they were on the same line, but now they It has moved to the next line. Of course, we've changed the image to a block level element. It was initially an inline element, but we've changed it to a block level element. That is for our image. Finally, I want us to style our anchor tag. And for this one, I want us to add a class attribute. A class attribute. Call this Google link. Can call that Google link. So I've added a class attribute. Just add a class attribute to the anchor tag. And we said to reference a class attribute in CSS, we use the dot notation followed by the class name, and then your declaration block. Then your declaration block. So for our anchor tag, first of all, I want to change the color. So this, you will note all links by default, they're usually just blue in color. So let us change this. Let us change the color to, I want something very distinct. Let me change the color to that. Blue is a default. I don't want to do red. I've already run red. What about yellow green? I can do yellow green for the color. Next, let us get rid of the underline. Let us get rid of the underline. So for text decoration, we can set that to none to get rid of the underline. Very nice. Text decoration, we set that to none. And let us change the cursor when you hover over this. Is it cursor? Property is cursor, if I'm not wrong. I change the cursor to pointer. So, yep. I hope you can see the cursor is changing. So what have we done to our anchor tag? We have introduced a class attribute to the anchor tag so that we can style it using a class selector. We have changed the color of the anchor text to yellow-green, and we've gotten rid of the underline, and we have also changed the cursor pointer. By default, a cursor pointer is this arrow, but once you hover over the link, it changes to the hand. Yeah, so that is what we've done for our anchor tag. Once again, let me update this repo for anyone who might need the code. Yeah, the repo is updated. The repo is updated. So, by a show of hands, by a show of hands, by a show of thumbs up, not hands, by a show of thumbs up, let me see who has been able to modify their image and anchor tags. Very nice, very nice. Very good, Sammy, Vincent, Ruth, Kel, Obadiah, Nicholas, Marceline, Praise. Very nice. Very, very good. Very good. Very good. I think now you can update your CVs. You can update your CVs. Eh? You can update your CVs now. Yeah, yes, you can call yourself web developers. You can update your CVs now. Where are you stuck, Kevin? Just if you're stuck anywhere, please let me know. Hey, front-end maestro. Alvin is the front-end maestro. Very nice. Uh, yeah, Bona is saying we can hack NASA right away. Ah, very nice, very nice. Good, 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 good. Mine isn't displaying the color. Have you followed my instructions as I have laid them out? Huh? Have you followed my instructions as I have laid them out? Are you sure, Warren? Please make sure your property value pairs are separated with a semicolon. That one may also deter you from displaying your styles. Uh, you want to hack Elon's bank account now, eh? Wow, 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 wow. Yeah, so let me just copy this to the chat box. Make sure your class attribute has been defined first for the anchor tag. Remember, for the anchor tag, we introduced a class attribute. It is called Google-link. That is the class attribute that we introduced. And that is the one that we are using in our CSS selector, the class selector, in order to style our anchor tag. Okay? Simon, it doesn't really have a purpose. We are just showcasing the different properties and values that you can use when you are modifying anchor tags. It doesn't really serve any purpose. Remember, styling is just about modifying your presentation, modifying your web pages, making them presentable. You're simply changing the visual aspect of your web pages. Okay? That is a purpose of styling. So what is it that you want to visually change about your web page? Ask yourself that, and then research on it. How can you achieve that visual change? And then now you can come back and implement it. That is the purpose of styling. You're just improving the visual appeal of your web pages. Can you compare what we had in week 1 and week 2 and what we currently have now? Can you compare and contrast the two? Because our week 1 and week 2 web pages were very dull. They were just text and simple borders on the table, nothing much to talk about them. But now we are seeing how you can actually increase the visual appeal of those pages by introducing color, by changing sizes, by changing positions. Okay? That is what we are doing. That is the purpose of CSS. What language not supported or defined? That one is strange. Where are you getting that error? Is it on the browser or on VS Code? Miriam, can you help me with where you're getting that error? I'm not sure how I can assist with that particular error, unless I know where it is coming from. Yeah, so yeah, you can clearly see who missed last week's lesson. You can clearly see who missed last week's lesson. Yeah. How do you get an how do you get an image URL from Pexels? How do we get an image URL from Pexels? I think we went through that practically. How do you get a URL? How do you get a URL from Pexels? Very nice, Rickens and Nicholas. You just simply right click on the image and copy the image address. And then you can simply paste it on your source attribute. Very nice. Very good. Thank you. Thank you. I think we can move on. We can move on. We can move on. We can move on. So that was method number 2. That was method number 2. Let us look at method number 3, the most preferred and the most recommended method of including your CSS styling information on your web pages. And for this particular one, we will head over to our second file, our data.html file. I want us to style the table. I want us to style the table. So for method number 3, this one we refer to is as external styling or external CSS. Method number 3 is external styling or external CSS. So with external styling, this is where you have a separate file that hosts your styling information. You have a separate file that hosts your styling information, and what happens is you then link this separate file to your HTML document. So first things first, we need the external file. So on your directory or on your file explorer on VS Code, simply create a new file. Oh no, let me arrange your work. So I'll create a new folder called styles. And within my styles folder, this is where I will have my file. I give this file the name style.css. Very important to note, however you name your file, your styling file, however you name it, please make sure that it has the .css extension. That is what identifies that as a styling sheet file. Okay? So very important. It needs to have a .css extension. Very, very important. So I hope you've created your file. I hope you've created a file. For me, I have placed mine in a styles folder. If you have created yours in the root of your directory, it is still fine. It is still fine. But important to note, it's good to organize your work. It's good to organize your work. Have related files in one place. So CSS files, you can have a folder for that. Images, you can have a folder for that. Fonts, you can have a folder for that, and so on and so forth. It's good to arrange your work. So after you've created your file, once again, I reiterate, please make sure you've saved your file with a .css extension. Very important. After you've created your file, let us go back to our data.html file. And step number 2 is linking your external file to your HTML document. And how do you achieve that? You achieve that by the use of the link tag. You achieve that with the use of the link tag. So on the link tag, we are going to introduce 2 attributes. One is the relative relation attribute, and 2 is the href attribute. Okay, so the relative attribute, this simply defines the relationship of the linked document. It simply defines the relationship of the linked document. For CSS, by default, this one is style sheet. This one is style sheet. The relationship is style sheet. And the href attribute defines the location. It defines the location of the external file that you want to link to your HTML document. So once again, this location needs to be very accurate. If you miss out on this location, then the styling information that you define will not be applied to your web page. Okay, so this one also needs to be very, very correct. Same way, an image will not display if the location is wrong. Okay, so the href attribute defines the location of our external file. And with that simple line of code, you have linked your external file to your web page. Now we can go ahead and define our styling for our table. In this page, we have a table and a footer. We can go ahead and define our styling for our table and our footer. Okay. So we open our external file. For our table, let us give our table, can we give our table maybe an idea? We give it an ID or a name or a class. Let's do a class. And do table data. That will be my class name. So I have introduced a class attribute to my table. I have introduced a class attribute to my table. And on my style.css, to reference a class, we use the dot notation followed by the class name. We use the dot notation followed by the class name. So for the table, is simply going to do a simple styling on our table. So we'll start with the width. We want it to span the entire width of our page. So we set our width to 100%. And for our table, remember when we put a border on the table last week, the border lines were appearing twice. There was a double border on the table cells. So we get rid of that. We will get rid of that using this property. It's called border collapse. Property is known as border collapse. That will get rid of that. The spacing here, I think we'll leave that one out for now. We can modify our font size. Maybe to 18 pixels. And then we can align every bit of text to the left. And align every bit of text to the left. I think our table has table headers and table data, definitely. So we can modify those ones and put up a border. We can modify those ones and put up a border. Not a very big border, so 1 pixel, solid, and we stick to black. It's for our table head and our table data. Simply do a background for a table head, background color. You can do a background color for a table head. This one we can do gray, yeah? Can do gray. And then for the text, we can do white. For the text color, we can do white. Okay, let us see what we have so far. So that is the data.html page. Data.html page, and that is what we have for our table. Doesn't that look much better than what we had last time? Doesn't that look much better than what we had last time? Let me just copy the styling. Just a minute. Very, yeah. Let me copy this. Yeah. Let me update, just a minute, let me update the repository. Let me update the repository. 1 minute, 1 minute. It is repository. Styles folder and then style.css. Delete the data.html. Okay. Okay, so there you have there's the repository. It has all the codes. Updating a repository is as simple as committing and pushing your changes to the repository. Yeah? So where were we? We were looking at our table. Yeah, so that is our table, our newly styled table. That is our newly styled table. Looks much better than what we had previously. Yeah, so let us finish up by styling our copyright info. Let's finish up by styling our copyright info. For our copyrights, I'll simply use element selector again. So what do you want? We can align to the center. You can align to the center. Align to the center. Can change the font color. So for my footer, I can change the color. That one is very distinct. No. Let me do a background color. Let me do a background color. Not green, gray. Let me do a background color for the footer. I want this footer to go to the very bottom. I want this to go to the very bottom of the page. So I'll do position, set it as absolute. Then I will use this property called bottom. Since my background is gray, I'll change the color of the font to white. Change the color of the font to white. Yeah, let's just see what we have for that one. To my browser. Why is it not centered? Okay. Want it to span the entire width. So add that. It is centered now. Yes, very nice. That is my footer now centered. It is my footer now centered. I don't have a header on my page. I'm only styling what I have. So position absolute. This is used to modify the position or property of an element. And the absolute value, what this one does is simply it removes the element from a normal document flow. Normal document flow in that the normal document flow. You see, I mentioned that elements are either positioned inline or block, inline or block in regards to the position. So inline means the elements appear one after the other, and block level elements usually span the entire width of the web page. So what position does, it simply removes the element from the normal document flow and then positions it relative to the nearest element. Relative to the nearest element. I don't know whether that is making sense. This word's relative. What does relative mean? What does relative mean? Someone who did English. What does relative mean? Relative depends. Eh, relative depends. Trying to look up for the meaning of relative in relation to. I think that one is the most closest, um, yeah, definition. The most closest definition, in relation to. In philosophy, it means depends or biased. So in relation to, I think in relation to would be the most appropriate meaning to use. So it is placed in relation to any other preceding element, in relation to any other preceding element. So what this property does, it simply gives you precise control over placement and position. Simply gives you precise control over placement and position, such that when you use this particular property, you are not relying on any other property within your page, within the page. You're not relying on any other property within the page. So this one is like it is separated from any other property and any other element. It is separated from any other element that appears on your web page. So it is positioned relative to all other elements on the web page. Yeah, nothing good comes easy. Nothing good comes easy, yeah? But anyway, those are our three styling methods. I think I have updated. Let me update this once again. The repository. That is the styling file. The styling file. Let me update it. Just a minute. Let me just update the repository. Yeah, yours is at the bottom left because you did not add some things. I think I added something at the very last bit. I added the width property so that to allow the footer to span the entire width of the page. Shared the repository. The code is there. The code is there on the repository. Please access the repository if you want to view the entire code. Yeah, so that was method number 3, external styling. So this is the most preferred and the most recommended way of including styling information on your web pages. So the good thing about external styling is you can use one file to apply styling to one or more or multiple pages. You can just use one styling file and you can apply those styles across various multiple pages of your project. So you simply include the link to your external file in those various pages, and the styling information will be applied across those pages. So that is the major advantage of this. You have a centralized place where your styling information resides. You can easily maintain it. in that you can add features from one to one place. You can update it very, very quickly. It becomes very easy to update since you have a central file, and maintaining it becomes very, very easy. Becomes very easy. That is the major advantage of that. That is the major advantage of an external styling sheet. That is the major advantage of the external styling sheet. Okay. So I think what am I left with? What am I left with? What am I left with? I think the only thing remaining is spacing. We can touch a little bit of spacing, and then we can end our session for today. We can end our session for today. Touch a little bit on spacing, and then we end our session for today. Okay. So when it comes to spacing, we have two main ways of applying spacing on your HTML elements. And for this one, I will go back to the index.html and see how we can achieve that. And I will use the image because I think that one is the most appropriate element I can use to showcase spacing. Yeah, so we'll use the image. So I'll go back to the index file. This was my index file. So I'm going to use this image to showcase the two types of spacing that you can define in CSS. So for spacing, we have two major ones. We have margin and we have padding. So for margin, this defines the space outside an element's border. This defines the space outside an element's border, between that border, that is between the border and other elements. Whereas padding is the space inside an element between the border and the element's content. So those are the two types of spaces that you would come across when you are dealing with CSS. So we're going to showcase this using the image. We're going to showcase these two types of spaces using the image. But before we see that, let me just explain how you define this. So there are how many ways you can define this? Single, double, and 4 units. There are 4 ways in which you can define these spaces: margin and padding. One, when you're using a single unit for the space, For example, margin, you set the margin to 10 pixels. This means that this space will be applied all around the element, all around the element. The space outside the element's border. It will be applied all around the element. Same applies to padding. The second way is when you're using double units. So for example, I set the padding to 10 pixels and 15 pixels. So if I define it like so, then this spacing will be applied. The first digit will apply to top plus the bottom, and the next one will apply to the left plus the right side of the element. The first one applies to the top and the bottom. The second one applies to the left and the right side. The third way is while using 4 units, 4 digits or 4 units of measurement. So for example, the margin, you can have the margin as 0 pixels or just 0. And then you have 20 pixels, you have 15 pixels, and you have 10 pixels. So if I define it like that, moving in a clockwise direction, starting from the top, the spacing will be applied as so. 0 for the top, 20 pixels for the right, 15 pixels for the bottom, and 10 pixels for the left. These ones do not have commas. The values do not have commas. Yeah. So you move in a clockwise direction. If you're using 4 digits to define the spacing, you move in a clockwise direction starting from the top. So 0 pixels for the top, the right will be 20 pixels, the bottom will be 15 pixels, and the left side will be 10 pixels. So you can always play around with these figures until you get your desired positioning and layout. Until you get your desired positioning and layout, it matches what you actually want to achieve. So we are going to showcase this. Let me just go back to my index file, and on my image, let us begin with margin. That is the space outside. That is the space outside. So let us do 100 pixels. Something very drastic so that it is noticeable. I hope you saw our image has moved. Let me remove it. That is our image originally. It is at the left border of the page. But once we place our margin, let me just do 200. Once we place our margin, then our image, the space outside has increased. If we had something here at the top, then you would actually see it is actually 200, 200, 200, and 200 all around. 200 pixels, 200 pixels. That is for the margin. You can also test out the padding. Padding is the space inside. Padding is the space inside. So for this one, I can do 50 pixels. For that one, I can do 50 pixels. And there is the new position of our image. That is the new position of our image with padding of 50 pixels applied all round. Sorry. With 50 pixels applied all round. And thus I come to the end of my week 3 session. Please feel free to ask any question regarding the session that we have just had. So once you understand that concept of spacing, the border, and the content, border, content, and the spacing, then you would fully understand what we refer to as the CSS box model. The CSS box model. Yeah. So that was just introduction. Imagine that is just introduction. That is just introduction. CSS is quite wide. It is quite wide. There are so many interesting properties that you can interact with. You can do so much with CSS. You can have very crazy layouts. You can have amazing transition effects and animations by just using CSS. So this is just an introduction. Now the onus is on you as an aspiring web developer or UI and UX expert to go and research more on the different properties and values that you can use on your web pages to achieve amazing visual representations of your projects. So, yeah. When let me just update the repository. That was index file, the index file. Yeah, that was the index file. So I really hope you got to learn something. Yes, my sincere apologies, my most sincere apologies for the issues that you're experiencing on LMS. It is something we are constantly working on. And as we try to solve all those issues, make sure that you have a seamless learning experience. So please, please, please kindly bear with us. It's something that we are working on. Yeah. Let the hackathon come now. Yeah, so please pay attention to PLP socials, the Telegram channel. Yeah, information about the hackathon should be posted up there in the next few days. There will also be an information session. So kindly check your timetables for that. I think it will be in the next few days, maybe on Wednesday or Thursday, just to give you an overview of what is expected for the hackathon. But I know for sure the hackathon will be starting on the 31st and ending about 4 days later, around the 4th, the 3rd or the 4th there. And remember, follow instructions. Follow instructions. Very, very important. Follow instructions. Follow instructions. Stick to what is on the instructions. Please stick to what is on the instructions. Otherwise, you'll miss out. And there is a reward. There is a reward for the top 3 best. There will be a reward. So do your best. Do your best. No, you cannot register for tomorrow's sessions now. Registration for the sessions usually opens around an hour or 30 minutes before the session. The links are just not open, so you cannot register now for tomorrow's sessions. External CSS is the preferred mode of styling your web pages. That one is very, very good. That one is very, very good. You have you separate your concerns. You have your styling separate. You have your structure of your web pages separate. So external is the most preferred and recommended way of styling our web pages. So the recordings will be made available. I think the morning session has already been uploaded. I think what is pending is the afternoon session and this session. So they will be made available before this day ends. I need at least an hour for the video to complete rendering, and then they will be uploaded. So remember, you've been given a wonderful chance and opportunity. Please do not waste it. Please attend to your quizzes and assignments. Very, very important. And attend to them on time. We really want to see you excel in this scholarship. So please don't waste this chance and opportunity. We are really rooting for you guys to become experienced developers. Yeah, so please, please, please make the most of this wonderful chance and opportunity. Otherwise, I will end the session there. Amilioto, unfortunately, I cannot assist you with SQL. Unfortunately, I cannot assist you with SQL. Can you please kindly just reach out to the database instructor? They would be better placed to assist you on that one. You can reach them on Gerald at powerlandprojectafrica.org. Gerald at powerlandprojectafrica.org. That is the database instructor. And they should be able to assist you. For any issues on the LMS, kindly shoot me an email at ad at Powerland Project, that is EDDY, ad at powerlandprojectafrica.org. Please, if you can, attach a screenshot. Sometimes your explanation may not point us to the on how to effectively resolve an issue. So attaching a screenshot will immensely help us on how to troubleshoot that. So you can shoot me an email if you have any issue on LMS. And shoot an email as soon as you experience an issue. Do not wait for several days and then report an issue. Immediately you experience an issue, just shoot me an email very, very quickly so that it can be attended to as fast as possible. Otherwise, thank you, thank you, thank you. Powerland Project Africa. Powerland Project Africa. Powerland Project Africa. The domain for the email is powerlandprojectafrica.org, not Powerland Africa. So thank you so much. Have a very, very good night. Next week, we will be looking at something very, very interesting. We'll be delving into some advanced CSS techniques and concepts, and especially so how can you do responsive web design? So that one will be a very, very interesting topic you do not want to miss. I will be seeing you next week. Do have a very, very good night. As always, it has been a pleasure. Thank you very much.